Today we're going to do column chromatography of Kool-Aid. We're just using regular old standard grape Kool-Aid, and we're going to try to separate two of the components of the Kool-Aid. And we're going to use this plastic column. It's called a Sep-pac C18 column, and that C18 just tells us that the polymer in the column is 18 carbons long. So this is a really non-polar column comprised primarily of this 18 carbon chain polymer. So we've got a really nonpolar column, and then we're going to contrast that with the solvent system that we use. So what we're going to do is first prep the column itself. Now we need to kind of decide a direction that we're going to use the column and stick with it. And then the first thing we're going to do is prep it with isopropyl alcohol. We're going to use standard 70% isopropyl alcohol, which is typically called rubbing alcohol. So I'm just going to pour my isopropyl alcohol into a beaker to get started. And I want to be able to show you what I'm doing. Okay. So I'm going to kind of focus on what I'm doing now. I've got my 70% isopropyl alcohol, my rubbing alcohol. I'm going to take 10 milliliters of that, and I'm just going to kind of prep the column with that isopropyl alcohol. And at this point, we're just kind of cleaning and preparing the column. So first with 10 milliliters of isopropyl alcohol, and I'm going to try to remember the direction that I'm using the column and kind of keep that orientation the same throughout the whole experiment. So I've done the 70% isopropyl alcohol. I'm going to move on and do 10 milliliters of distilled water. So, and this beaker is just kind of my waste beaker at this point. Now I've got distilled water. So I did the 70% isopropyl alcohol. Next up, distilled water. So I'm just going to collect 10 milliliters of distilled water in my syringe and apply that to my column next. So I'm really prepping the column. Now the column's prepped with a lot of DI water. It's actually distilled water here. Okay, now that I've done that, I'm prepared to put the Kool-Aid right on the plate. Now I've prepared some Kool-Aid solution. And this Kool-Aid solution doesn't have the sugar added to it. It just has about 0.3 grams of Kool-Aid per 100 milliliters. So I've got some Kool-Aid solution, about 0.3 grams per 100 milliliters. I'm going to get 10 milliliters of my purple Kool-Aid solution, and it really smells like grape Kool-Aid, let me tell you. And put that, I'm keeping the column oriented the same way. I keep pushing the liquid down the column the same way. This is kind of the short piece of the plastic coming off the column, and this is the longer piece of the plastic. That's how I'm kind of keeping track of the orientation. And now look at how all of that purple Kool-Aid is applied to the column. And at this point, very little colored solutions coming off the column, maybe a tiny bit, but mostly that purple Kool-Aid solution is all applied right onto the column at this point. So I'm going to put this back where it goes and set my waste aside. And so next I'm supposed to draw 5% isopropyl alcohol, because right now the Kool-Aid's mixed with all water. And so the first solution I'm supposed to get is the 5% isopropyl alcohol. So I'm going to get a little bit of the 5% isopropyl alcohol. Actually going to pour out some of the 25s. I'm ready to. Okay, so I've got the 5% isopropyl alcohol. I pre-mixed 5%. I'm going to draw 10 milliliters into my syringe. And again, I'm keeping track of the orientation of the column. I've got that short pointy end down. Got my 5% isopropyl alcohol. And now I'm going to start using these clear well plates for the resulting solution. So look what happens with that 5% isopropyl alcohol. I'm first getting just the